was named to Canada's top 40 under 40 list in 2019, recognized by his own university, Concordia, on a top 50 under 50. Is education worth it? Can anyone start a business?
I don't think anyone can do it. You're not a true entrepreneur if you can't deal with the failure.
So many people have a fear of even starting.
A lot of my success has come from listening to what older people have told me are mistakes they've made or the right things they've done. And human nature is to do those things again yourself and make that mistake and learn it yourself thinking you're smarter than the previous person.
There's this role of the education system that just continues to pump out carbon copies or the same version of these people, put them into society, taking up all of these positions. Why do you think that is? Right out of the gate, Sean is on vacation and we'll be back next week. So I went and got the boss instead to sit in his place. Shout out to Sean, well-deserved vacation. Daniel Schlaepfer is joining. Thanks for doing this.
Good. I mean, if Sean was here, he would tell you that a long time ago he was the one that hired me. So at one point he was the boss. But that's not the case anymore.
When Sean watches this, because I know he will, he'll have thoughts, I'm sure. Shout out to Sean. I want to go through a lot. We've been changing the conversation on this podcast to be more about entrepreneurship, about business, about giving people an alternative to maybe a 9-to-5 that they hate, a boss that they hate, getting up in the morning and going to a job that they can't stand. And Daniel Schlaepfer, I just want to run through a few stats here. This is a guy with multiple degrees, including an MBA from the John Molson School of Business at Concordia University, holds a CFA charter, passed the FINRA Series 7 and 24 exams, holds the Canadian Securities certification, was named to Canada's top 40 under 40 list in 2019, and was recognized by his own university, Concordia, on a top 50 under 50 with alumni shaping business in Canada. So when it comes to business, we picked the right guy to talk to, I think, today.
Yeah, I definitely studied a lot of it, yeah.
When are we adding, my first question, when are we adding sommelier to this list of certifications?
I'm probably getting close there, but that's just practice, not education.
That's a hard one to get.
Yeah, that's just practice.
Yeah. We'll get into that a little bit later on. Let's start with education right out of the bat. A lot of people are in maybe a position where they're feeling like they need more, or they're wondering if they need more. You're a guy, before we came on here and started recording, you even said you went through all the steps, went through the process that most people go through to get that 9-to-5, and went to a lot of the schools that produce a lot of the people that have those 9-to-5s. You're a guy that's not once in your life had a 9-to-5.
No, never had a 9-to-5. No, the funny story, my education is actually a pretty funny story. I went, my first degree, which you didn't mention, was I went to Rotman undergrad and I did a Bachelor of Commerce, and it was a total accident. It was one of the first years that you could register for courses online at the school.
Yeah.
That's showing my age. And they had the real bird courses, first year seminars, and I'll never forget, one class was called Mathematics at Work, Home, and Play. So I registered for 5 of these bird courses. The system was only supposed to allow you to take 1.
Okay.
And the school starts. I go to the first couple days of these bird courses, and I get a call, I guess at the time, from the admin office to come in, telling me that they don't know how this happened, but I'm not allowed to be in all these really, really easy classes. So I said, well, what am I supposed to do? I have no idea. I just picked what sounded interesting.
Yeah. So
she looks at my high school transcripts and she says, oh, maybe you should try to do business school. Like, you have all the right credentials and all the right stuff. And at U of T, 75-80% of the kids, they take out of the 300 kids, they take 80% of them are taken based on their first year grades. So you don't have to be pre-accepted into the business school.
Right.
So I said, okay, fine, I'll do it. If this woman thinks this is what I should do, I'll do it. So I ended up registering for the business courses. Then I ended up getting into the business school, but had never intended to go to business school.
Amazing. If you could go back, let's go back in time to that point when you were maybe wondering which direction to go and picking those bird courses, as you mentioned. If you could go back now and tell that version of you to do one or the other, or go in this direction or the other, What would you say to that version of Dan?
Well, it's interesting because I actually get asked to come to University of Toronto a lot to give talks to the younger students about this particular topic. What advice would you give? And I think I ended up in a path that I didn't really know, like most people, most kids that don't really know what they're going to do. And you kind of do what society tells you to do. That's what I said before the classes. If you look at my resume from an education perspective, I did the real resume you would do to go get a 9 to 5. I should have been an accountant, or I should have been doing something other than I'm doing now. But I ended up following just the weird path to get here. And we can get into that later on, how I got here. But I always tell people, you got to do what makes you happy, and you got to do what keeps you interested. Too many people, there's way too much pressure. I think students take way too much debt right now. There's way too much pressure from their parents. The cost of living is very high. And everybody's goal is immediately to graduate and have a salary and have a job. Yeah. And I push the university right now. You need to have more entrepreneurs. You need to do more things to push people to create jobs when they leave and not just get a job when they leave.
We talk a lot about the system, if you will, and it basically manufacturing those types of people. Why do you think that is? Why do you think there's this role of the education system that just continues to pump out, carbon copies or the same version of these people, put them into society, taking up all of these positions?
Look, I think one of the biggest issues is student debt. I think one of the biggest issues is the cost of getting an education. So when I went to school back then, the original the Rotman program was under what they call the Bachelor of Arts. It was a general program. It was a Bachelor of Commerce, but under the arts group.
Right.
So it was like $4,400 a year. My mom had put money away, so my undergrad was paid for by my parents, and my grandma had put the money away. So I didn't graduate with any real debt, and even if I did, it would have been $20,000 worth of debt at that time. I think the current cost of that degree is north of $20,000 a year. So if you are a student and you go to one of these schools, most students and most families don't have that kind of money.
Of course.
And I think there's an immediate pressure to start paying back that debt. You need that cash flow. Yeah. You can't all of a sudden take more risk on, right? You can't go all of a sudden try to start a business. How are you going to go get money when you already owe somebody $80,000?
Right.
And in the U.S. it's even more, but here, that's still a big number.
And it keeps circling, essentially producing that same result. If you had to maybe do something different in that position, if you were in that position, that person going to school, accumulating that debt, if you had to make a decision at that time and say, I want to go in this direction instead, I have that entrepreneurial spirit, what's the way to do that?
Look, I think there's a lot of entrepreneur programs. There's a lot of VC firms that have programs at schools. There's Mars that does research programs at U of T. There's a lot of clubs and groups and things you can join, and a lot of those are actually backed by some well-established companies that put resources behind it. We in fact sponsor the case competition at Concordia, which I think brings up some entrepreneurial people that are solving real problems. But I think you really need to take a look at look, I live in my life with a philosophy that if I'm happy where I am today, I can't regret the path I took to get here.
Right.
So I'll never go back and change anything that I did. Could things have been better along the way? Maybe. But the advice that I give to people is life is a lot longer than the first year or two when you come out of school. So don't plan for the first year. You need to plan for the next 10 years. I mean, I had sort of upper average grades, not the best grades. And I was lost when I was in school, and I met a guy who became a bit of a mentor to me, and he took me out, I remember, for a beer at a bar called Hemingway's in Toronto here. And I said, I'm a little nervous, like I'm not getting the placements at the good jobs and things like that. And he said, you and I have got along for a while. He said, I can tell you right now, you're never destined to be the guy taking orders from somebody. You're destined to the guy giving the orders and hiring people. He goes, if you look at the people that are running today's businesses, they're kind of the BB plus people. He goes, they end up hiring the AA plus people who really end up being more calculators and 9-to-5 driven people, which he goes, with all costs you want to avoid.
It's a good point. If you had to look at something along the way that maybe was a challenge in that process, getting to that first step. And I want to talk a little bit about, how this company came to be, what it is today and that process, but maybe talk through a challenge or two, in the early days.
Well, one of the interesting challenges, and this became with education, is I thought I was going to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a lawyer. Okay, that was what I really wanted to do, and I thought I wanted to do. I didn't know why. I just thought it was a cool thing to do, and they made a lot of money. And you have to have an undergrad degree, and then you have to go to law school.
Right.
You have to write the LSAT. So I did my undergrad degree. That woman and the guidance counselor who pushed me into BCom, BCom doesn't generate a lot of A+ students, but your grades are considered when you go to law school. So when I graduated, I had a B+, A- kind of average.
Right.
And I did pretty well on the LSATs. And I didn't get into any law school in downtown Toronto. And I was dating what ended up being my first wife at the time. And I wasn't going to go out of the town while she was still at the University of
Of
Toronto.
course.
So I ended up passing on law schools. And funny enough, when I was at the university, I got a job through a friend of mine working at the library system at U of T. Great job, paid you a fortune to study. You didn't have to work very hard. And I had never done an internship at any company that there was. I never signed up for one. I was never given one. So here I am. I have this Bachelor of Commerce degree. I'm not going to go to university. And I'm like, man, I need to get a job. So I'm cold applying for jobs after I graduated while everybody else had jobs lined up from the internships that they had done.
Yeah.
So that was the first real challenge, is what am I going to do next? And I can tell you right now, the jobs I was applying for did not pay a lot of money.
Select Vantage, one of the largest proprietary trading firms in the world. If somebody's hearing that term for the first time, what does that mean?
The simplest form is that we give the capital to people to trade, and we take a percentage of their profits if they're right. And if they are wrong, we bear the brunt of the loss.
How did that come to be? How did it take its shape the way that people see it today?
Well, this is a slightly longer story, and it goes right back to that moment where I'm sending out those job applications. So I'm sending out these job applications, and I'll never forget, I answered an ad, like I think it was in the Metro newspaper, which was like a free newspaper. There was a story in the that you get on the subways.
Right.
And I sent the resume in an email, and I get a response by none other than Sean Katina, who actually is usually in the seat. And I had a job working at the library, so I had this, the same job, and they extended me a little longer after I graduated. And I said, I'd like to come in and try it, a company called Swift Trade.
Right.
And Swift Trade had an okay reputation back then. I mean, it wasn't Merrill Lynch, it wasn't Morgan Stanley, but it was a trading firm. The owner was on TV every week. There's some advertising, there's a buzz around it. And I remember saying to Sean, I said, look, man, I can't wear a suit to this interview because I'll look like an idiot the rest of the day at work. Do you mind if I just put on like a polo and some khaki pants? He's like, man, trust me. When you get here, you'll realize I don't care. So, I do this sort of interview, and it was interesting, kind of ad hoc. But as I was getting the tour, I noticed as I walked into the room, there was guys outside having cigarettes, talking about how much money they made. There was guys in the elevators talking about how much money they were making. And there was this room full of like darts and ping pong and video games and a fridge full of pop and snacks, and it was like a young group of people having a good time, and it was my dream. I always tell people one of my dreams was I never wanted to tuck in my shirt. I knew I'd be successful. I never had to tuck in my shirt, and I remember that day I had my shirt tucked in. But when I looked around, nobody else did. So, and I thought, this is a cool place. I was down on University in Dundas. I'll never forget. And I remember going home to my girlfriend at the time, and I said, I don't know, there's something about this place. Like they give you all the tools and all the things you need to make money. You just have to figure out how to do it. They give you the money, they give you the computers, they give you the software, they give you training, but you have to figure it out. And it felt a little bit like it felt like a great opportunity, but also a little uneasy that they're bringing in 20 people at a time to try this. They tell you how unsuccessful it could be. So I ended up signing up to be a day trader at Swift Trade, and I signed up actually with another person who you work with, Neil Roberts. Yeah. So he was actually hired by Sean as well. And Neil and I
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, Neil and I sat together, literally side by side. I think I sat next to Neil for like 8 years almost, maybe even longer. I started off as a day trader, and the story goes. At one point, one of the owners came up to me and said to myself and then Neil, and said, hey, we've got this concept for a new franchise type model. Would you guys like to go and try it? So Neil and I got together and we said, this sounds like a pretty cool idea. We're going to go do it. And we thought we should bring along Sean, right? We liked Sean. We should bring him along. He'd be a good trainer. So the three of us partnered up, and we opened what was back then called Swift Trade Campus. The idea was you would bring in students, again, like right out of school, And it's funny because I tell the students about this now, and they all wish they had this ability to do this now.
For sure.
And the idea was that they would come in and they would learn to day trade between classes. So instead of going to get a job at the bar or the Gap or things like that, you would get real trading experience, and you had the opportunity to earn more than minimum wage while trading stocks.
Right.
And you didn't have to work 30, 40 hours a week. So we got an office space right across the street from U of T. We got a couple of ads. I think we got like 700 resumes when we had a couple of ads come out. I don't think we ever had to put any out again. So many people were applying. We were written up in a bunch of magazines and things like that about the concept. I mean, I think the tagline was trade real money, gain real experience. And the newspapers were writing how we were giving students $100,000 to trade. Now, they had $100,000 to trade, but that's not how much they were allowed to lose.
Of course.
That's how it worked.
Of course.
And I did that with Sean and Neil for, again, no 9 to 5, right? We're doing this on our own after we had prop traded for a few years. We did it for a while, and we just sort of went our different ways after a while. I kind of wanted to do different things. They were quite comfortable continuing on with the campus model. So I ended up going back to be a proprietary trader at the head office. And the same guy that walked up to us 3, 4 years, 5 years before walks up to me again and says, I got another idea for a business model. Why don't you run this for us? So I ended up going and running another group for them, some algorithmic trading, and they were building a business and they needed some support for it. And the part about this is funny is the whole time you talk about education, I was doing pretty well. I was making decent money. I was making way more than I would have of my friends that went to Merrill Lynch or Morgan Stanley or all these other places. And I was getting real experience. I was really trading. I was really managing people, mentoring people. Like this was a real. I remember talking to a friend of mine at Merrill Lynch, and he said, "Man, they didn't let me touch real money, like or real capital allocations for 18 months, and you were doing it day 4, right?" So we ended up doing I ended up doing, my ex-wife said to me, she goes, this can't last forever. She goes, you don't really seem to work that hard. You seem pretty happy with this. It doesn't seem like it's that stressful. So she encouraged me actually to do a CFA and to do an MBA at the time. And I was doing it at nights and on weekends while we were running these businesses. And then, the algorithmic business sort of subsided and was slowing down. And lo and behold, the owner came to me again and had another project for me to do, right? So this sort of a cycle of them coming up and asking me to do projects. The last project they asked me to do, it turned out the company, and it's a very public situation, Swift Trading was in a lot of regulatory issues and getting into a lot of problems. And they asked me if I could fix some of those problems. And through a series of again, events, I helped them fix a bunch of things. I cleaned up risk system, helped clean up some compliance, that's where I ended up having to do. I actually ended up having to do my Series 7 and Series 4, so 24, because the owner himself had been suspended, and I need to fill in for him while he was suspended. So this was the sinking ship I was on. And then look, I looked at the business. The business was a great business. They had made some mistakes along the way, and I came up with a plan to basically salvage the business, turn it into what it is today, which is Select Vantage, which is different than Swift Trade in many ways, but really at the essence is born from the ashes of what Swift Trade was. And it's just a continuation of that business, I think, run probably better than it was before, more efficiently, more compliant, that's for sure. But really, it's a continuation of that same business founded in 1997.
How important is timing in business?
Look, timing is... luck is really everything. There's no real such thing as luck, but luck and timing are kind of the same thing. If you're in the right place at the right time, I'll never forget when I proposed to turn Swift Trade into Select Vantage, I was sitting in a room with a bunch of lawyers, and I put my hand up like I was in grade school, like I had an idea. And I remember the guy looked over at me like, what is this kid doing here? And I'm like, I have an idea on how we can solve this problem.
Right.
If I wasn't in that room at that time, there was no opportunity to put up my hand. And I realized I was probably smart enough, maybe had more guts than most people to actually put up my hand and make the suggestion. I was smart enough to have a suggestion that was viable.
Yeah.
But in reality, timing was everything. But it's about putting yourself in the right situations at the right time, and that in itself requires some level of intelligence.
So many people have a fear of even starting. Talk a little bit about maybe what you think in general people do wrong in that situation. What are people doing wrong starting a business or just getting into that first position?
I think when you're younger, there's a couple of pieces of advice I can give. I think when you're younger, people look at the next year or the next 2 years like it's everything. and they don't look at the next 20 or 30 years
Right.
and realize that the next 12 to 24 months is such a small amount of time in the grand scheme of things,
Right.
and you can get through those things. I think another massive problem people make, especially younger people, is they will listen. A lot of my success has come from listening to what older people have told me are mistakes they've made or the right things they've done. And human nature is to do those things again yourself and make that mistake and learn it yourself, thinking you're smarter than the previous person. I feel I've been objective enough, and one of the things that's led to my success is that I have been able to source the people who I look up to and I would like to seek advice from and actually listen to that advice. I mean, I'm even in the process right now. People think I'm crazy. If my wife's pregnant with my fourth kid, people think in today's day it's a fourth kid. It's crazy. Thank you very much. But I ask people that I consider successful in life and happy in life, what are their biggest regrets? And the largest regret people tell me is not having more kids, the people that have kids.
Wow.
And I say to myself, I'm like, I can afford it. I have the ability to have it. My wife watches them. Why wouldn't I want to have another kid? And I talk to people that are 60, 70 years old, and they're like, after 20 years, there's not a lot that matters. And I tell people my age this, and everybody says, "Oh, this is you're totally wrong." But it's listening to people. You know, I spend a lot of time listening to people that I look up to, and I wish I had elements of their lives in the future, and I try to figure out how to get to those places.
Great advice. Who is that person? Let's talk a little bit about that specific person. Can anyone be an entrepreneur? Can anyone start a business? What does that person need to look like?
I don't think anyone, and this is very cliche, I don't think anyone can do it. I think what the biggest issue people have and the biggest thing that separates the successful entrepreneurs from the non-successful is the ability to fail. Like, nothing is going to work out perfectly all the time. Right. And I think that if you fear failure and you fear like taking that leap, it'll never work. And if you go ahead and do it and you can't handle the failure, it'll never work. It's those people that have the ability to try and fail that are the ones that are successful. I think a lot of people can have great ideas. I also encourage people, if you have a great idea and you think, I have a great idea, but I don't have sort of the guts to start it, or I don't have the initiative to start it, go find somebody that has the initiative, that can get things done, and partner up with them, right? Find a way to I'm very successful with the people that I work with now because I know what I'm not good at. I know what I can't do, and I find people that can do the things I can't do.
Right.
And I think anybody can put themselves in an entrepreneurial environment and entrepreneurial situations, but they themselves might not be able to do it on their own. Too many people go at it on their own, and they either don't take the risk. I have a good friend of mine who just never takes that leap, never takes that risk. And then I have other friends that they did it, it blew up in their face, and they can't handle the disappointment or the shame. I'm dealing with a group I'm working with right now, to no fault of theirs. Their business just didn't work out, and they don't even have the guts to bury the business and close it because they're too embarrassed to people that they failed. And it's just, you're not a true entrepreneur if you can't deal with the failure.
What does that process look like, though? Like, understanding this is not working and then being able to say, that's okay. What can I learn from this and then take into the next one?
Well, I mean, that's the secret. One of the secrets to success is being able to learn from your mistakes. I mean, you have to be able to do that. But I think as an entrepreneur, it's pretty easy. If you can't survive doing it and you have no prospects of surviving, paying your bills and doing it, then you have no chance of doing it.
Yeah.
Too many people enter into entrepreneurial situations really not well planned, not clearly defined goals. They start businesses and not realizing that even as a very successful business, I've seen this countless times with restaurants and places like that, where even at a highly successful situation, this isn't even successful for you personally as a business that you can feed your family and have a wife and pay your mortgage and do those things. I think not having defined goals and going back to, and I think this helped me also having all the education that I did. With any business, if you can come up with like key performance indicators and things that you say, I need to achieve this is my goal, and I need to reassess, am I getting to the goal in the timing that I set at the results that I was supposed to get? If I'm not getting those things, I need to reevaluate the goal. I need to reevaluate what the definition of success is. And if it's not there, I have to reevaluate the whole idea that I'm working on right now.
Oh, there's that saying, learn by failure, or fail in the learning process, and that's the only way to move forward. It's almost something that people have to start accepting as just part of the journey, and understanding that we talked in another episode a little bit about, if you're not trying, you're not moving forward. Is there a way to get people, in your experience, is there a way to get people beyond that fear and help them understand the way to be okay with failing?
I don't know. I mean, I think that people have to, if people can't even get up to try to fail, they're never going to succeed. And then if people, as I said before, if they can't deal with failure, they're never going to succeed.
Yeah.
But it goes back to what I said about learning from other people. I mean, if you see people that are successful and look at the most successful entrepreneurs on the planet, none of these people did this without failing. Like, nobody had a perfect, I mean, Berkshire Hathaway is literally called Berkshire Hathaway because the deal failed.
Right.
Right? That's the reason Warren Buffett named it Berkshire Hathaway. Like,
Right.
That's what it is, as a constant reminder of what failure is. I think if you take a look, you know, Amazon started selling books. I mean, you take a look at what these ideas were. They were not the greatest ideas.
Finished result. Yeah.
And I think you take a look at, you know, even Steve Jobs over the years, countless failures, right?
Yeah.
But you have to continue to try. I think people need a good support system. I mean, I think also if you're in a relationship or you've got to also do these things early. If I had a wife, 3 kids, and sort of the life I have now, could I go and take that first step now?
Yeah.
Maybe not. I say this to people as I see people's appetite for risk slowly drop off, and friends of mine slowly drop off as they get older and have more responsibility and more sort of fixed costs to their life, whether they're financial costs or emotional costs. And then it always gets to a funny point where sort of a lot of my friends in their mid 40s to sort of mid 50s end up having like a midlife crisis, and then they realize they got one more shot to try to do this, and a lot of people quit their jobs and try to do it then.
Something else. Yeah.
You know, and maybe their kids are a little older and they have less financial responsibility. But I don't know what I think certain people are just not cut out for it, and that's why I've always told people, like, if you have a great idea and you think it's something that could be successful, but you don't know how to go about it and implement it, look at somebody that you envy that's going to implement things that maybe just doesn't have that great of an idea, and partner with them.
You mentioned education and having the ability to fall back on what you learned, some of the lessons and experiences you took from that process. Today, with the debt level that we talked about, with the cost that we talked about, is education worth it?
It's a yes and a no. So I'll tell you what my education, besides helping me in several business decisions and some work I've had to do over the years, it did give me the ability to take a chance. When I left the Swift Trade campus model, working with Neil and Sean, I had a real sort of soul-searching debate. Am I going to go ahead and trade on my own and try to do something in this entrepreneurial environment, or am I going to go get a job?
Right.
So what I did was, I was now at this point 27, whatever it was, 28, I went and sent out a bunch of feelers to people I knew that were in good positions. You know, here's my experience, here's my education level. Like, you know, I've only ever worked really for one place. And I was getting good feedback that, hey, you could come get a job here. I know somebody at sort of this dollar level. Well, when I knew that worst case scenario would take me 2-3 months to go find a job at that quote dollar level, it gave me that sort of confidence that I might as well keep giving this a shot, because I think there's higher dollar levels here, and I like doing what I'm doing.
Right.
What drove me to continue to do this, like, look, there was a lot of ups and downs and failures along the way here. Don't get me wrong. It was, I really like doing what I do every day. I really like the environment. I grew up liking stocks. I mean, I always tell people I won a stock trading competition in university, one of the national ones. And I won it all, and then literally a week later, the prize was an E-Trade account with a bunch of money in it. I lost all the money in a week. So I always found it fascinating. I like the capital markets. So to me, being able to work in it, and we're one of the few firms that gets to work in it in a very entrepreneurial way, in a fun way. There's not a lot of firms out there that are our size that have young, fun people working there all day long, and then we don't really put the shackles and restraints of a 9-to-5 on people. Mm-hmm. So I think the education part, it gave me that sort of negotiating collateral with myself. Like, I could basically say to myself, all right, go ahead and give this another shot, because worst case scenario, you could go do this. It's helped me along the way where, look, let's get serious. We work in a day trading company and we deal with large Wall Street firms. We've gotten in several arguments over the years, whether it's some, accounting numbers or regulatory things or, all kinds of battles we get with these firms. I think my education has given me credibility, whereas if I had achieved the same success without the education, I don't know if I'd be treated the same way by the larger firms. I think it's definitely helped me. I mean, do I sit here and design financial models like I learned? Not once in my life have I designed a financial model, right? I mean, I've probably used less of what I learned in my CFA than anybody that's ever earned a CFA. But I think getting the CFA itself was a challenge going through it, and I think that made me probably a better person. But I think, and hold on, let me finish this. You asked about the cost of it. I also think in today's world, there's a way to get a solid education, not necessarily having to go through the full cost. I mean, the CFA is $4,000 or $5,000 all set. Right?
Right.
It's not a ton of money. You need an undergraduate degree to have that done. But I think there's other ways. The Series 7, Series 24, the CSC, PDO, these are all relatively cheap exams you can take if you're in the right position at the right type of company.
For someone maybe looking at finance or looking at trading, the financial industry in general, if you had to point them in a first step, which one of those might be a good place to start?
So what's funny is we are, I'm not just saying this because this is the case, but we are probably the only place still in existence, probably probably one of the only. There's maybe a couple more if you want to trade some futures, but there are not a lot of places you can go, but firms like ours where you can come in, literally no degree, literally no experience, and have a chance to trade in the financial trade basically Wall Street stocks, trade high street stocks, trade whatever you want to trade, and learn to trade the markets. Almost every other place requires a fancy degree. And it's actually getting worse. Most of the trading is automated these days, so we're actually finding that more people that are being hired for what are called trader positions are being hired with engineering or programming degrees, because that's the way trading is done.
I want to talk about technology specifically, but on that note, just in general, for someone sitting on the sidelines today, maybe no programming skills, maybe no tech focus at this point at all, is there still an opportunity from a human level to trade and be successful as a trader?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, are you asking me if there's an opportunity, or is it possible for humans to still do well trading?
I had a friend of mine who phrased it like this. You're looking at the same things that arguably the smartest people in the world are looking at, coding, some of the most advanced computer systems in the world, and we're sitting here with our meat sticks trying to, punch, go, and stop and time it right to make money.
I when I took over in 2011, 12, I faced a lot of criticism from people in the industry, friends of mine, that said AI, machine learning, high frequency trading, it's going to take over. I tell people this all the time. I've written a bunch of papers on it. Machine learning requires historical data that's how it works, to learn, right? AI, same thing. It requires historical data to learn. Stocks are kind of this weird living organism that constantly change. If this was the case, why would we continually be growing and not shrinking as a business?
Right.
There are so many stocks that are, so high frequency trading generally is done where you're trading one component or one asset against another asset. Generally, there's a correlation between an index or two stocks, and you have a reference price, and if it deviates from that reference price, you assume it's going to go back to that price, and you put on a trade that says it'll go back, and reversion to mean. When it comes to stocks, not every stock is in an index. All of a sudden, a stock IPOs tomorrow. How does an AI program trade that? There's no historical data.
Right.
If all of a sudden some fundamental news changes how a stock trades, how do you have any historical data to build a strategy around the historical trading of this name that had a fundamental change? What we've had to do as a firm is we've had to move away from the basic names, the sort of top 100 names, top 500 names, and move into the names that are traded less by these computer systems. There's no coincidence that computers are doing such a good job, but more and more stocks are abandoned by trading. There's less liquidity in the breadth of stocks today than there used to be in the past.
Yeah.
I had a long conversation with the CBOE, the BATS guys years ago. They had nobody trading tons of the illiquid smaller names. This is a big topic in the US. How do you get more trading back on these names? The analogy is this: when humans were doing the only trading, you were assigned as a market maker a bucket of stocks, and you would have what I always say is sort of a crappy name that nobody trades, a mid-level name, and a good name. And the market maker used to make a lot of money on, quote, the good name.
Right.
They'd make less money on the middle name, and they'd probably lose money on the crappy name.
Right.
But they'd be assigned that name and have to deal with it
Right.
because they were allocated.
Make sure you're.
Because they were allocated those other ones.
Yeah.
The high frequency guys came in and started trading the other names. Okay, they started trading the really good names. And they took all of that profit away from these market makers who just said, well, why am I going to go put my obligation on trading these worse names if I don't get to make the money on the good names? So they literally abandoned a lot of those stocks. Our business ends up picking up a lot of those abandoned stocks, and we end up trading a lot of the names on markets like the Canadian Securities Exchange or the junior NASDAQ names. A lot of our volume in our trading occurs in names that are all of a sudden hot that day or have news that day or exciting that day that may not have really even existed 2 days before on anybody's radar. In stocks, we've seen a lot in the last couple of years of stocks on the U.S. markets that start off the day at 20, 30 cents and they run up to $1, $2, $3, $4, $5, $20.
Sure.
We are the ones trading tons of those shares. Are we sitting there trying to beat a computer that's stat-arbing Apple against the NASDAQ? No chance. The other thing I'd say is this. A friend of mine used to run the market making program for a large company called Citadel. I think everybody knows who they are, in Canada. And they had a theory that if we were not in the market, they would do better. Their theory was that we are basically stealing fills away from them or good trades away from them. So we exchanged some data and we ran sort of like a little project together and we took a look at it. And in the end, it turned out that they made more money because we were in the market and both of us were making money. Because although occasionally we would steal an order that they would need for their strategy, but many of the times we'd be getting out of a trade that was at a much different time frame or at a totally different strategy from anything they were doing. Yeah. And we were putting them into the good trades they needed to get into. So I firmly believe there will always be a need for human traders. I mean, there's a lot of computer power and capital that goes into coming up with models to trade things from an automated basis. Yeah. Who is going to go trade a stock that trades 20 times a day, that's 5 cents on a junior Canadian market, when the maximum amount of money they can make out of that name is a few dollars a day or $20? Who's going to go build a model for that? Nobody. But we don't have to build a model because we have these things called brains that sit there and adapt as we trade.
This will lead us into another point that I want to get to, and that's social media. But everyone's so focused, specifically in the beginning, new traders are so focused on Microsoft, Apple, Tesla, all the names that you see and use on a daily basis, Google, anything in that top 100, as you were talking about, where, the bigger opportunity, especially out of the gate, might be stuff you've never actually heard of.
We bring people in that are driven to this business because of the sexiness of the Apples, the Teslas, the Amazons, the Microsofts, but the majority of the profit we make has nothing to do with those names.
It's a great point, and I think a lot of people will be surprised to hear that. I want to touch on a couple of things you mentioned in there. Liquidity. For anyone who's hearing that term for the first time, liquidity is simply the availability of volume, the availability of available trade partners, if you will, in the market.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned sort of the Teslas and the Amazons. I always tell people, if you were learning to play soccer, right, and you got paid if you won the game, okay, and you know nothing about soccer, would you go and play against the best players in the league, or would you go play against a bunch of 3-year-old kids?
Right.
If you were paid to win, you would rather go play against 3-year-old kids. And I find it really, really funny that people come to this game and they go against the greatest engineers, the greatest traders in the world, the largest banks, and think that they are going to beat them using a Robinhood account, trading the names, and not realizing that the markets they are trading are being made by the very people they're trying to beat.
Right.
Whereas if you got to look for names where you can potentially find an edge. If you go look at a name that's covered by 100 analysts and a name that's covered by 0 analysts, which one do you think you have a better probability of developing an edge in? The 0 analysts, right?
Neil might have a different answer for that. Play your 3-year-old in soccer. Neil with a ruptured Achilles right now from playing his child in a soccer game. But no, it's a great point. Let's talk about AI. What is the role of AI in the market today, and where do you see that heading?
So currently, I think AI is being used in many ways, to improve tools. So we did a test pilot here, trying to use some machine learning to figure out if we can make our compliance tools better. Like, would the system figure out something we weren't seeing?
Mm-hmm.
We couldn't achieve it because we didn't have enough data points, but we ran the project and we learned a lot about how it works.
Yeah.
Doug Sifu, who is the CEO of Virtu, publicly said when AI became a big trading thing, he said, all of our trades are based on three principles, and if we can't answer those three principles when a regulator calls, we're not making the trade. So his theory was that I'm not going to let a machine decide what we should trade. And I always say, if I have an AI model, and I published a paper on this, if I had an AI model and it all of a sudden did something wrong in the market,
Mm-hmm.
who's at fault? The computer system? I can't
Right.
blame that. Like, it's going to be on us. So I don't think a lot of actual trading decisions are being made on when to execute and when not to execute based on AI. But I think people are using AI to improve routers in the industry, to improve compliance tools, risk management tools. I think AI is being used to make people better at what they do, but I don't think it's necessarily being used. I mean, I could be wrong, but I read quite a bit and I know a lot of people. There's not a lot of massive strategies being used based on, hey, let's let the computer figure out how to make money and go make money. Like, nobody is that stupid.
So all those Instagram ads for the AI algo bot thing that's $1,500 a month probably should.
No, probably. I mean, but look, I had a pitch from a couple people. I have a call with them tomorrow about a tool to make traders more efficient. Basically, a program where you can start asking questions typed up about situations during the
Right.
day and setups in the charts,
Right.
and it will go and search the chart databases live and figure out where are some of the setups you're looking for
Mm-hmm.
to generate ideas and help you siphon through large amounts of information and make you better as a trader. I think that's very interesting, but there's no tool that, like I always tell people, if you had a magic box that would make money, you wouldn't go sell the box. You would just
Exactly.
use it to make money.
From a risk management side specifically, how does AI fit into that world?
I mean, I think what you can do is you can start to look at, in our business, you can start to look at like traders that are negative or periods of the day that are negative and start siphoning through data. Why are we negative in certain days? Is there undue risk at certain parts of the day, certain traders, certain markets? It helps you go through large amounts of data and identify patterns and things you may not have seen, and then you can make better decisions on how to handle things. I mean, but that again, that applies to compliance, that applies
Right.
to a lot of parts of the business.
Right.
It's just making you. It allows you to go through large amounts of data and look at things in a more efficient way.
Do you think there's a misunderstanding when it comes to money in general, and how money is put to work in equity markets today?
Oh yeah, I actually had this conversation with somebody an hour before I got here. I don't. I think equity markets as a whole to the general public, and I actually only learned this after COVID and through the rising interest rate environment. I mean, I came in a I started in the industry in 2003. It was a interest rate environment that was on its way down and then got to record lows, and we had the financial crisis, stayed down. They had to keep it down with all of the problems. I've realized that the equity markets to the average person is not investing. It's not. Most people are out there, and this is a form of entertainment, and it's a discretionary pastime. I think some people, majority of people actually that have Robinhood accounts and E-Trade accounts and these accounts are just straight gambling. I
Yeah.
think they go and tell their husbands and their wives and themselves that I'm not betting on sports, I'm betting on stocks, and it's smart. But most people have absolutely no clue what they're doing. And I think that it's kind of sad. I mean, I had a discussion with a big exchange group yesterday. They wanted to bring weekly options. They had just launched them in their country. And I asked them, I said, do you not have any concerns for these weekly options that it's just going to burn retail investors? And they said, look, the regulators are keeping a close eye on it. But yes, the regulators have concerns, but our job as the exchange group is just to provide the product. I think very few people who buy a stock understand what the company does beyond the logo and what they see on social media and on TV. I think they don't understand how money flows. I don't think they understand that the stock market is a zero-sum game. I think GameStop and the whole meme craze proved that to us, that I think people really don't understand it. And I've noticed as interest rates went higher, there was less leverage in the system, and there was a lot less retail trading. There was a lot less share sizes shrunk. It was interesting when the dot-com bubble burst years ago. There was some interesting stats around. Back then it was E-Trade and Schwab and all these guys. They had these accounts, and back then trades were not free, right? Trades were $50 or whatever they were. And all these accounts went from sort of having $5,000 and $10,000 in them to having a couple $100, and they just sort of sat there dormant.
Right.
Now, because we have trading in fractional shares, we have we have weekly options, we have all these cheap products to trade. People are opening up accounts and putting $200, $300, $400, $500 in them and trading those accounts with a few $100s in it. Like, this is all about getting rich quick. I think this is all people trying to solve your problem and getting out of their 9 to 5.
Yeah.
I think the GameStop saga proved that as well. You had a lot of people that it was really about getting rich quick.
Yeah.
If you sat the average person down that is buying and selling stocks or options all day long, if I had to guess, 9 out of 10 of them would fail a pretty basic test on what they're actually doing.
There is no magic sauce. There is no easy button, if you will.
Look, we have 2,400 traders currently active in our system. Probably on any given day, 1,800 of them come in. It cycles around. We've probably gone through 140,000 people since 1997 to get to those numbers. Wow. That's less than 1%, kind of. It's about 1%. Maybe it's more than 140, but about 1% is the number. A little over 1% that are still here. That have a lifetime career positive earnings, it's probably higher, but this isn't easy. And these are people trying to do this as a full-time job. This is not easy. And then you have people that have a 9 to 5 and then go all of a sudden, I'm going to go open up one of these Robinhood accounts or one of these Wealth Simple accounts. I'm going to go put some of my discretionary money into it, and I'm going to go, while I'm at work, trade my off my phone all day long and hope that I'm going to beat the biggest banks in the world and do better. It doesn't really make sense.
But yet they make it as easy as possible to go down that path and open those accounts. You mentioned the options market. Let's talk a little bit about leverage in general. What is the role of leverage and debt, and using debt specifically to make money?
Well, I mean, people use debt to get leverage, right? People go and get they get levered up so they can put it down a little bit of money. The bank will give them a bunch of money. But I think we've seen this before. The average person doesn't understand how debt works. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had the housing crisis. We're approaching another little bit of a crisis, especially here in Toronto, where a lot of people are underwater on their houses. I don't think people fully understand that when you put down $200 and then the bank gives you $800 and you have $1,000 to trade with, the stock doesn't have to move that much for you to be out of the money on your $200. So I think that's a huge issue. I don't think people really get it. There was a comment around the GameStop phase, and when we were talking about options, I don't understand how when I, as one of the largest equity trading firms in the world, if I want to go trade options, I have to go prove competency that I can trade options, and there are material changes to even our equity account based on the fact that we now might start trading options from a risk perspective, but the average person, retail guy, can go click a few buttons and is trading options the next day. Like, it doesn't really make sense to me, some of these products. I mean, there's a lot of like mini future products opening up around the world. All they're doing is giving exchange level leverage to people, mm-hmm. so that effectively the brokerage firm doesn't have to give it to you.
Lessons to be learned, I think, from a society in general. We're getting out of time. I want to make sure we don't take all day here, but I want to talk a little bit about life away from the office, because I think it's important for everyone to be focused and have that goal, have that direction that they're heading. Talk a little bit about how you enjoy life away from the office.
I have an interesting philosophy with this. I mean, I grew up in the middle of the city. I grew up downtown. Our office is, basically downtown Toronto. Yeah. I made a conscious decision when I was younger that I would rather live in a smaller apartment. I grew up in a relatively small house in the city. I'd rather live in a smaller place, closer to my office, not have a commute. I think the work-life balance is extremely, extremely important. And I think that goes into the whole getting out of the 9 to 5 thing. A lot of people don't realize they go get a 9 to 5 and they go get a job because it has the right salary, or they think it has the right salary, and they don't realize they're losing another 2 hours on their commute. Yeah. And they have no idea that the grind is much worse. I talked to my in-laws who live in the States, and my father-in-law can't figure out that he wastes an hour and a half in each direction to go to his job, but he's making, 10% more than he would at One Closer,
Right.
but he's working way more than 10% more hours, right? I mean, I think it's extremely important. I think your mental state, I think everybody saw that during COVID. I think your mental state is very important. You have to have that good balance. You have to be able to, you have to be doing this all for something, right? If you're doing it all to just do it again tomorrow, you're not doing the right thing.
Yeah.
You have to be doing it all, whether it's for a husband, wife, children, or when you go home and you have to be able to sort of reap the benefits of what you've been doing. And I see too many people, like I see a lot of people that they've got the expression work hard, play hard, and I see people that take too few vacations every year, but the ones they take are insane and they don't even really rest or hang out. But I made a big conscious decision that I want to spend time with my kids. I want to see my kids grow up. I don't want to not be around them. I don't want to waste a bunch of time in a car. When you make a decision when it comes to even getting a job, you need to take these things into consideration. I see too many people that don't do it. And I always tell people the dream sort of is, this goes to entrepreneurship, if you're doing every day what you want to do, and it doesn't really feel like you're kind of doing anything. Like, to me, life, family, the business, it all blends into one, right? Like, if all of a sudden I have a bunch of phone calls and I'm on vacation with my wife and kids when it comes to the business, like, she's not giving me attitude that I have to be on these calls, because, she's well aware of what goes on with the business all the time, and I spend enough time with the family and things like that she's not as concerned if things like that come up. But I see too many people where business can ruin a vacation. It ruins their time. I see so many couples fight over the work-life balance. I think you need to find that. And I think it's probably easier to find that as an entrepreneur. I think that was one of the things that attracted me to sort of doing my own thing is to me, there's no work and home. It's all just kind of life. Like, I kind of, have a script and have life. Yeah. There's no real difference to me.
It's a great mindset.
Yeah.
We had Kevin O'Leary in the building a week or so ago. He's
a friend of mine.
he made a comment to me that I want to get your take on. I asked him what wine he was drinking lately, and he said, your boss has him on one of the best wines that he has ever had before, ever. He actually went as far as saying, you are now the guy when it comes to wine in this city specifically, but I think he was actually talking a little bit bigger.
Yeah, I mean,
give us the wine tour in a nutshell here.
Well, it's funny. I actually met Kevin through wine, of all things. It's funny when he comes to my house to drink, he gets served nice stuff. I go to his house, I get Kevin O'Leary wine. So it's just not a great trade.
Sounds like Kevin.
No, I mean, it's just wine. It's an interesting thing. I got into it actually during COVID, like a lot of people that were locked up. And I used sort of my mathematical brain and my problem-solving brain to realize, to figure out that there's a pretty cool world of a lot of very interesting people involved in wine. And there's an expression, and I'm going to tie back. I don't know if you ever heard this expression. It's called chess is the great equalizer, because it's a game where you need the pieces, you need the board, and the richest people in the world play it, and the poorest people in the world play it, and they can play against each other, and it
doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Nobody cares.
Yeah.
And in sort of this world of finance and entrepreneurs and even kings of Wall Street and business, and wine is a great thing that ties a lot of these people together. And when I realized how to sort of access the market, the things you could get, how to get it, where to get it, I could get my hands on things that would get me in the rooms with the likes of the Kevin O'Learys or the David Solomons of Goldman Sachs, or I met some unbelievable business people through this. And it was sort of getting a very product that was rare. It actually wasn't that expensive relative. People would pay a lot more money to get these things, even to get these people to time.
Yeah.
But I mean, guys like Kevin will sit there and have an hour-long conversation with you over a couple of glasses of wine because they want to drink this rare wine.
Right.
They think it costs a fortune, and I ended up sourcing it through a series of other things for a lot less. So people that are into wine are really into wine, and to me in business, it's proven to be the great equalizer. Like, it is something that I have met so many of the sort of most important, powerful people. And great entrepreneurs and people that I've learned a lot from just straight through wine.
if you had to point someone in a region area, if they're just getting started, what's the best place to go?
So a friend of mine in the industry, remember I told you I listen to people and I go back and I listen to what the people that have to say. So they have an expression in wine, all roads lead to Burgundy. So basically everybody in the end wants to drink Burgundy. It's the most expensive, it's the most rare, it's the hardest to get. When I started buying wine, I started buying some Italian wine, California wines, things like that. And I realized very quickly that my buddies kept telling me, you're wasting your time, all roads lead to Burgundy. So I had some good advice from friends given to me. I didn't buy a lot of these other things. I actually got rid of a lot of them. I ended up focusing early on the right area. And the advice I give to a lot of people is if you're really going to get into it is don't waste your time with the other stuff. Just go straight to the Burgundy.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And as you said, this is something that is an appreciating asset if you get into the right stuff.
Well, assets have cash flows. This is sort of more of a what it appreciates, but it's more on the greater fool's theory, right? You can only sell it to the next guy that'll pay more than you paid for it.
Of course.
But to me, it's been just an unbelievable way of opening doors, meeting people. If the list of, I mean, I won't get into the list, but the list of people I've had dinners with or times with related to wine, and you end up having meaningful conversations. It's pretty impressive, and I think the list will continue on and on and on as I continue to meet new people.
Great place to end.
Yeah.
Daniel Schlaepfer, CEO and president of Select Vantage. Guys, hit the like before you go. Watch out for clips. We'll send them over to your social media as well. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.